Chill here with Sirius Dallas Moon, Soul Hour, Mercury Day, and I'm here in Ben Gurion Airport in Israel recording our 2027 astrology. We've come to month of May. Now, a little bit of omens. Ascendant midheaven 1 degree Libra and the Cancer. Moon 24 degrees Capricorn, Sun 9 degrees Cancer. Venus 20 degrees Leo. Venus almost ingressing towards Magha. Um, Ruling over Chiron in Taurus, and I drank the little bit of water that I have left because I was too lazy to fill in the water, and then I had this almost a cup of tea. um, so this is like the cup, more than half full. Of course, my immediate self wanted a snack, but there wasn't any. I was watching Neil the Seal, the Tasmanian legend short, where they had to call a lady that was traveling with a Shih Tzu to take the Shih Tzu off off the face of 100 kilo Neil that wasn't looking at the dog in the same way the dog was looking at it. The Shih Tzu, by the way, was wanting to play with the with the ton of of a seal. And then somebody said, "Well, I'm from Tasmania. This is the only thing our country is known for." And I'm like, "I'm writing from Israel. You're so lucky. This is what your country is known for." So let's talk about May with that prompt. And then I was thinking about all the, kind of like the red flags we had before we became known for that. By the way, in between, I saw the Greece. In Greece, there were some people, probably funded by a certain gas or oil company, that's very likely Jew, seeking Jewish people or Israeli people to attack. That if you want us to stay in Israel, make livable wages, livable living conditions. Abolish violence, and then people will stay here. May 2027, May. Pluto will be going retrograde on degree 7. We're going to have a new moon in Taurus, 15 degrees Taurus on May 6th. And Mercury will ingress to Gemini, conjoin Uranus at degree 4. Of course, conjoin also Sedna between May 9 and May 11. Mars ingress to Virgo May 14. Venus ingresses to Taurus May 15. And she conjoins Chiron. The elections for Venus in Taurus are gone for the coming years, for the coming decade. Um, Full moon, 29 degrees Scorpio. Sun conjoining Uranus, May 27, May 20, full moon in Scorpio. So April had a full moon in Scorpio, degree 0, with the Sun in Taurus, with Chiron, and the Venus, the ruler, with the 30 million files that everybody erased. 0 degree Aries, where Neptune and Saturn conjoined. Now we're going to have a full moon, a new moon in 29 degrees Scorpio, full moon 29 degrees Scorpio, What are my predictions? Saturn is already going to be 22 degrees Aries. By the way, this morning we had a moon 22 in Capricorn, and ruled by Saturn in Aries, ruled by Mars in Gemini, conjoined in Sedna. Within the hour of the moon 22ing, there were 3 murder cases. All of the murdered were men within 1 hour. So it's like that's the moon 22ing in Saturn sign, with Saturn in Mars sign, and Mars with Sedna. Um, Not gonna do the murder mysteries here, but that's something that I was just thinking about, how the Mars Saturn, Saturn Sedna, Mars Saturn Sedna, unfortunately, this volatile. Mars is going to be with Virgo, Mercury, 20 degrees Gemini, Chiron already 2 degrees Taurus, and Rahu already 15 degrees Aquarius. Well, Mars will be ruling Neptune and Saturn in 2 degrees Virgo, Mercury 20 degrees Gemini. This is going to be full moon. Saturn 22 is a structure that could be deadly. We may be awakening to the fact that there was some sort of a deadly structure regarding that was formed around mutable land. Now, mutable land can simply be North Holland, or it can be a land where the borders have not been stable. Um, for example, in Palestine, I know that they made some sort of a digital claustrophobic, wouldn't be able to live there type of structure. And we might be fully understanding something regarding to how it affects the area. Or now Saturn Mars can also have to do with accountability. Sun 29 degrees Taurus, Venus 6 degrees Taurus, ruling over Sun and Chiron. Venus squaring Pluto. Here there could have been a collision of values between land, or the value of land, and some sort of industrial agrotech complex. Why agrotech complex? I don't know. Here we have this whole complex of Saturn, Mercury, and Mars, with the moon 29 degrees Scorpio, and then we have this Sun, Chiron, Venus. Venus at home sign usually has more advantage than Pluto. Um, and upon the square, because Pluto Venus hard aspects is Pluto experiencing itself as the feminine. It can both be the wish of Pluto to experience itself as the feminine, but it can be a crisis where Pluto experiences itself as the feminine. Not because Venus is aggressive, particularly not as a home sign, Um, like I said, honor the feminine. If for Aries I said plan for sovereignty before the PDF files dropped, then it's 30 million of them. So, so in Taurus I say honor the feminine. What would be my predictions for this one? Okay. There can be a certain deadly structure. It can be of military or even new structure, military tech city, and the young men or boys there, or the people of certain rank in the military, could be experiencing the fate of the feminine. Um, Basically, they would be the feminine in the structure. Saturn, in general, is a feminine, is a yin um, associated planet, and 22 is degree of Saturn in Aries, is a Venus Mars type of decan. Um, and there is also the how people work with the time or the timelines. They have to, like those that have the ability to work with the timelines, how should I say that? Honor in the feminine is an antidote to. So picking the timelines that honor the feminine is a remediation that when that remediation was practiced, and here's the thing, people can't get into an ego trip about that. Meaning, because honoring the feminine is basically transcending the ego trip of power, if that makes sense. And 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 that's the antidote. Um, Not saying it's in any way easy, because those things tend to bring. It's kind of like, if I think about pets or children, they test 48 hours. They test the person, and if a person is, let's say, if the feminine is recovering from being violated, unconsciously they're gonna have a lot of prompts, and they're gonna need to see that they're safe in all these prompts. Okay, it's just is a part of the process of recovery, um, and it tests every single residue. And again, it's not a conscious thing. It's not like they plan to go and make it difficult for. No, it's just they're trying to trust life, or they're trying to even to try to trust men, or the masculine is going through these prompts where the masculine has to effectively shows itself that it's competent at honoring the feminine. And when it happens, we see an immediate, but it can't be an ego thing. There's a deep and profound things, but they can be. How should I say that? But going that route is an antidote to these timelines. It's not easy, because definitely technology is a sort of is young, but the chaos is yin, and Okay, the telos of technology is masculine. The dynamic randomness that can be around, let's say, generative AI is feminine, okay, yin, and to combine them effectively. Okay, this is also true to figures like mothering figures. Is not an easy transit, okay, because all of these figures have been standing to the questions like, hey, where were they when so and so happened? And if they're growing a certain ability, then they're going to have to show that that ability actually prevents, and that they're not putting it on the recovering person that unconsciously needs to see that they are safe in all those situations. It was a societal flaw that people were harmed. That's the meaning of the feminine, okay? It's not the infant's blame that it was violated. That's the point. You would say, oh, you're doing infantilization of women. The people that tell me that are not in that phase of recovery, or that they're tending to other phases of recovery, and they may or may not meet that phase of recovery as well. Okay, we cannot replace if they were harming the infantile phase, we cannot replace that. We need to create an environment that is safe for that, and that is, okay, I cannot make this up. When I talk about honoring the feminine, that is, just like I said, plan for sovereignty with Aries, with Taurus, I talk about honoring the feminine. And nor can we project parenthood on people that are tending to their inner infant. Even if they're doing the prep for, let's say, orgasmic birthing, they're tending to their inner infant phases that show up as a result of this birth. That's why we should never push a person not to anything, not in bed, and definitely not to have children. By the way, also not to not have children, because it can have a backfiring. If a person was stuck at teenagehood or something. How it's going to express itself on a mundane level. I think we can divert the timeline from the timelines of, I'm sorry, what looks like a digital concentration camps, and it can even be a militarized ones, even for the soldiers themselves. I don't know. Like it's not a time, like it has a timeline that has a potential to not be looking very good, but doesn't have, like nothing has to happen. And in that sense, it's important to honor. Like if we honor that nothing has to happen, then nothing has to happen. Sun enters Gemini to conjoin Uranus. Sun enters Gemini May 21, conjoining Uranus May 27, at 5 degrees Gemini. Now, here I'm getting with Gemini as the twinning and the switching, in the sense that um, the ability to relate squaring Mars. Ouch, 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 ouch. There's an ability to relate with the twinning on a neural level. Mercury 28 degrees Gemini. Mars squaring from Virgo. It's going to be an ouchy point, because it's the Mars-Uranus square. We're now approaching the Mars-Uranus conjunction in Gemini, and the Mars-Uranus square point, it's not, yes, it's going to be an opening square Um, I think because of the Mars retrograde, it might even be because we don't have 2.5 years between 2026 and 2027. We will only be at the opening square on May 2027. We're gonna have a retrograde phase, but the for good the direct crossing the shadow, and it's going to be squaring the sun, which is another ouchie. It's an overheated. At least he's doing that from Virgo, where he is a little bit more. Mars in Virgo is a little bit more meticulous than the fast and furiousness, playfulness in Gemini, where until the person got that they were angry, it's already it's already done. But with Virgo, that meticulousness can play. With Virgo, Virgo has to remember that its sharp, its sharp tongue, mind, and word, or even action, is pointed here in a friction with something that is not yet, with something that's literally a child. So Sun Uranus might light up the spark to Mars that in Virgo is usually self-judgmental, and the tragedy of the Virgos is that they judge themselves more harshly than anybody could, and then people still judge them because the residues of their self-judgment make other people sometimes panic around them, and then and it's not like they can easily be told to rest a little bit. um, so a lot of the mistakes that a Virgo placement can do is simply because it is so self-judgmental, not seeing that something is only a child. Now, with this particular one, prompts this square um, to the Gemini placements. They don't have that. They're just playing with the options, not really knowing right from wrong at this time. While Virgo is already judging every meticulous detail and taking even intense action in an arena that doesn't even know right from wrong yet. So that's where I see the challenge. Um, Day charts are going to be more harshly affected. Mercury at 28 degrees Gemini is a telltale that there could have been a certain decision that was made prematurely, and Mars also ruled by this is that there's going to be a result, a yielding result to that friction. Whether it's good or bad, it's kind of like there's going to be some sort of a one way or another, and then we're just going to have to live with those results. Um, Frictional moment, challenging moment, that the action coming from Virgo is pointed at. Now, here's the thing: Sun Uranus is incredibly lit. Okay, um, it can be a brilliant child that is also just a child. And so the friction is also because Mars has to keep it in check, but also when we try to keep Uranus in check, it usually backfires. um, very difficult decan for Uranus to be at. Uranus is usually coming to liberate things, and here um, there is yeah, it's a decan where there can be a significant amount of mishaps that just happened and already had, like, nobody intended harm, but um, this is more or less what I see for that square. Understanding that that final square point will be only in 2027 May, when we are approaching the conjunction in July 2026, is a big issue, because we're going to have a Mars retrograde together with Jupiter. It's going to retrograde also in Leo, touch on Ketu. So this Mars will have been a very mature Mars. And Mercury didn't get to where Mars is, which means that the Sun and Mercury didn't get to where Mars is. So Mars is kind of like a passenger from the future that's running a reality check to planets that haven't yet seen the trajectory. Now, the good thing is that Mars can absolutely bring this information from that timeline of the future, and that update. For example, knowing that AI agents are toddlers with bazookas is kind of important. But Mars also has to remember that Uranus doesn't know what Mars knows. And that's the thing with the outer planets, okay? When something is an opening aspect to the outer planet doesn't know what it knows yet. When something is closing aspect to the outer planet can have a conversation, because the outer planet remember what happens when they were there. Uranus knows what happened when Uranus was in Virgo in the 60s. Now, as far as Mars pinpoints a timeline that could be compared with the 1960s, it can have a conversation with Uranus and say, yeah, I know where we're going. This is why I'm doing that and not that. When Mars is saying, wait a second, but what you're doing is also leading there. And then Uranus might respond, wait a second, we haven't tried that one yet. It's like Mars was like, I know what will happen. It's like, no, you don't. You know what will happen with you, Mars, but you don't know what will happen when I'm going to get there. Maybe in the short term it's going to be like what you say, Mars, but in the long term, and we don't really know, because Mars knows Mars. It doesn't know Uranus there. So remember how I talked about honoring the feminine as an antidote to the timelines that, and how the feminine as that which unconsciously creates or perpetuates certain things, or it's not that it creates or perpetuates, it's kind of like the fear times are coming, arising within the feminine, and it's not about that infant saying, oh, I'm adult, I have a choice right now, in as much as it's about them being seen that they're safe to be an infant and naturally growing. Why? Because of fertility and continuation. Okay, we cannot have more infants if we just go by the adult self. I'm going to say it again. The trajectory of recovery is supposed to serve continuation as well, fertility and creation. Doesn't mean of children necessarily. Now, if we can't bring an infant to the world, we haven't recovered. If we can't raise an infant in the world, okay, it's not just the biological system, but also if we can't raise an infant in the world, which is of course tied also to the biological system, then, okay, I'm not saying that there are no remediations for that. There's the spirit and matter of the physical, um, but if we can't bring an infant to the world and know that it is safe, and it is a global, then it means that just saying, oh, but I'm no longer the infant, I'm the adult self, I make different choices, is not suffice. It is suffice if on a global level it is now safe to bring or grow infants in the world. It is not suffice if not, and then we also have to tend to, well, how do we make it safe for an infant? Well, the infant self can't be deprived, and that's one of the really challenging things that we run both with Neptune Aries and with Chiron Taurus. Um, Venus conjoins Saturn May 7 and Chiron May 16. It's an update to Venus in the face of Chiron. What type of Saturn does Venus conjoin? Is it still the 22 Saturn? No, it's a 21 degree Saturn. Still volatile, but Mars is separating from the trine to this aspect. Chiron already degree 1. Moon Uranus upon that conjunction, um, sextile Neptune. So, and Venus is ruling Mercury that still conjoins Sedna, the Sun in Taurus and Chiron in Taurus. All three decans of Taurus are getting an upgrade and update with Venus, her value in Aries is sovereignty, and Saturn gives a reality check. How do we apply that? What does it mean? Mars Magha, Mars Leo, closer to Ketu, already direct, squaring Mercury. When words and actions collide, Mercury here tells us that the words represent our values more than our actions. And Sun in Taurus, Mars in Leo, we want to connect between actions and personality. Sun in Taurus, um, personality around relations, so leadership around relations. The decan of will and consent, but is closer to squaring Mars. Our values and our personality are not so matching our actions. And that could be the reality check that Venus is going through with Saturn in Mars sign. What can be the issue? Chiron Taurus can point to the infant phase. Okay, it's very overwhelming. May 29, Mars square Uranus. Venus squares Jupiter. Venus squares Pluto May 20. Venus square Pluto. Um, degree 7, Pluto is retrograde. Saturn's 22 in the background. Venus in her home sign, Sun still in Taurus. What I'm getting here is that Venus is a union, is something, it's like an organic union in the first decan of Taurus, which is why it's degree of exaltation of the moon. Okay, what is an organic union? The herbs that grow naturally in the garden. They're not pests, they're anti-cancer. Okay, they prevent cancer for cancer patients, but as cancer patients is different phase, but I'm not saying that they can't help, but it's preventing. And that naturally grows in the garden. Okay, it's an organic union. Pluto is still in that decan of Aquarius that was placed in an artificial, inorganic morality system on something that, on an organic union. In fact, this is the essence of the square. There was Lilith, and then she couldn't be subjugated, she was exiled. Then there was Eve, she became Lilith, suddenly Adam was attracted to her. They had willingly consensual sex, and they were cast away from heaven, from paradise. Okay, why? There was an inorganic morality system placed on something that was an organic union of two willing. Okay, the closest thing, the only time in the Bible where the sex scene was not rape. So Pluto is trying to place an inorganic system of morality that basically condemns the willing and ideates sexual boundary violation. Degree 7 is both to do with Venus and with Saturn. It is about the compounding implication of this tension. And Saturn is 22ing in Mars sign, Mars again in Virgo, Mercury in Gemini. A structure that is deadly to young men and boys. And we can prevent that again by honoring the feminine. Yeah, it is a very, it's not a, how should I say it, it's not a year, it's a once in a year, the opening one is a once in a year and something transit, but it's not too outer, it's not a bisextile, but it is an important transit, and degree 7 tells me that we're going to deal with the compounding effects of that tension. So again, we're given before there is something like an inquisition, a global religious war, a persecution of all the name, religion, or origin in all the world. There are a lot of signs, there are a lot of omens, there are a lot of things. If people are misdirected and they go by the same trajectories that they went in those previous timelines, then they yield the same telos. If they don't, if they do something different, then they have an access to something that can shift, that can change, but they're gonna have to give up the traditional. Not necessarily completely, but many things that they considered. I remember, for example, on an esoteric level, Dr. Angela Pucca looking into the Italian shamanism, in general shamanism, Italian shamanism, and the art of signature. It's basically signature or personal signature. And she, I think also Italian heritage herself, discovered that a lot of the reconnecting with tradition wasn't exactly tradition. I think that's to be expected. Or that we find out, when we look at the story of Abraham and Yitzchak, when we look around in the historical context, we see, yeah, that Abraham thought that to get the attention of Abraham, the God had to act like a what the Jews called pagan God, like a pre-monotheistic God. There was child sacrifice to pre-monotheism, and then Abraham felt chosen, and then the God says, wait a second. Now that we have established that you trust me, you don't need to sacrifice your first child. There's 30 million files that need to receive that update. And then Abraham insists and so on, and he said, okay, that little thing is a bit difficult to clean, you can't get rid of it. That was 2,000 years ago, or maybe even more. It was a residue of a pre-monotheistic God. But the people that are higher up the rank are afraid that the people will not believe in their God, and the people that are lower up the rank are saying that this is genitalia mutilation, and then the people who see that as the important thing in Judaism. Okay. And then if people talk about it, then it's anti-Semitic. Now, what if abolishing the residues of child sacrifice, which is genitalia mutilation, would be the way to transcend timelines of persecution and inquisition? For example, okay, then it's like we would have to. Let's just say if I come every time I want to record episode, I say ninth house, I come to Ben Gurion Airport. Tomorrow, let's say there is a war. Yes, and I don't speak that into being. And I can't, and I said to myself, no, but every time I come to record a ninth house, it's mundane astrology, the house of luck, and so on. And, okay, it's kind of like, okay, but not when there is missile attack, for example. No, I will hide the this and the that, and then, so it's kind of like, oh, sticking that to that tradition could have been life affirming. So kind of like, hey, even if there is, I don't know what, I stick to going here and having my tea or coffee and having an episode recording and so on. Which, by the way, April episode wasn't saving. We'll have to replenish it. Or alternatively, it means that, hey, maybe there is something that I could, for example, do otherwise or change or give up that tradition. Let's say when there is big war. It's kind of like, oh, if a person is doing the expected thing, or is having a daily routine. One of the things I remember, one of the charts I looked at had a fixed third house. Although Uranus was crossing, but it was crossing Taurus, that was a fixed sign, but they had a fixed third house. I said in terms of security, it's a very challenging thing. It also means that the ninth house is fixed, and that there are predictable patterns. So those are all things And by the way, when a person is acting unpredictable and they're still, then it shows us um, of something ongoing that is constant on a global phase.